All right, so welcome back to the second episode of the Atolo podcast. Today I have on Zempolich here with me from Morgan's Message. Today we're just going to be talking about mental health in college athletes and how it's affected the both of us, and talk a little bit about what she does with Morgan's Message. So with that being said, how are you today?
Doing great. Yeah.
So what do you do with Morgan's Message?
Great question. I am one of the co-founders of Morgan's Message, as well as director of podcasting, which is like a fancier way of just saying, like, I run the podcast and the stories platform.
Yeah, and what drove you to do that? What drove you to want to be a part of that?
Yeah, so I played lacrosse in college. I played at Duke, and one of my teammates, Morgan Rogers, was a year younger than me. We were pretty good friends. We both had our own experiences with injury and mental health. And Morgan died by suicide in July of 2019. And I felt like after she had passed that there were a lot of things that could have been different for both of us. You know, a lot of like that survivor's guilt of like, why could I get help? Why didn't she? And ultimately I reached out to her mom around her birthday the following year and was like, just went to visit Morgan's grave, and we kind of started this conversation on like, how can we do more for other student athletes who may be feeling the same way Morgan was, in order to empower them to speak up and to get help so that we can save someone else's Morgan. And through that, like, we got a group of Morgan's friends from high school, college, her twin sister, her mom, to start Morgan's Message in her honor.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome and unbelievable. I'm sorry for your loss. And so a question I was going to ask later in the podcast was about how accessible these things are. So like everyone knows that everyone may know where you can get help on campus, but I think it's more about is that person willing to go? So I talk a little bit about the struggle of like really stepping up and having the ability to go to the help center or whatever it may be. And I think it's harder, especially in men. Like, I notice a lot of my friends really struggle to talk about mental health and talk about what they've been dealing with, and especially in athletes, I think it's really hard because you can't necessarily talk to a coach or your parents, and it's something that really can eat at you. And I've dealt with a lot of that through lacrosse and even through high school with friends and stuff. And I think there is a stigma about going to get help in the first place. And I think it's another thing when it's like going through the school. I think that's really something that people struggle with, is trying to, I don't know the word, sorry. Yeah, really like coming out and being open about it with a random person who may not be that close to you. Yeah, so what sports did you play growing up?
Great question. I danced from like preschool through 8th grade, and in 7th grade or 6th grade, found field hockey and lacrosse and kind of shifted. Dance is really interesting, and the route to like dance I found was like, it's either professional or it's I felt like I couldn't do more than go professional or just dance like after school, and I wanted something to do in college where like I found lacrosse and field hockey were great outlets. I mean, I did like soccer, and I feel like all the like random sports your parents put you in. Fell in love with lacrosse and field hockey, thought I was gonna play field hockey in college, ultimately decided, interestingly enough, to play lacrosse, was late to the recruiting process. The schools kind of on the Rolodex at that point for me weren't aligned with what I wanted academically. Duke was like a dream school of mine. My dad went, my uncle, my aunt, and I grew up like, you know, watching JJ Redick and just felt like every time I went to Duke's campus, there was a connection. And so I ultimately reached out going into my senior year to the head coach, Kirsten Kimmel, and I was like, I think I can get in on my own, like my grades are good, I can be like one of your academic recruits. And she offered me a recruited walk-on spot and was like, if you're in, you're on the team. which was great. I think that was like the perfect best case scenario for me. So that's how I like ended up at Duke.
Yeah. Duke was my dream school too. I settled for D3 lacrosse. But yeah, I think that's awesome. And I was gonna ask, what was it like growing up, and did you have any struggles with mental health growing up in high school? And
Yeah, so depression actually runs like there's a lot in my family genetics of like depression, anxiety, alcoholism. So none of those topics were necessarily new to like my family and my support system, but I think there was a reluctance to say a lot of things out loud. And I dealt with some mental health struggles my sophomore year of high school for like a variety of reasons. I think I had mono, I was like sick, I kind of lost some friends, and it was, I think being a teenager, I mean, I think life is hard at any age really, but being a teenager and going through so many changes, like socially, athletically, academically, it's just like a shitstorm. And I had really bad depression the fall of my sophomore year, and I ended up going to therapy. I wasn't put on any medication, but in college I dealt with mental health later down the road.
yeah, and how did that affect your recruiting process? Because for me, my freshman year ended like in the middle of February, right? Yeah, I think, or March, because of COVID, and then it kind of like slowed down the recruiting process. I didn't even get to play lacrosse my freshman year, and then sophomore year was like completely cut short. And so when did that recruiting process begin for you?
Yeah, so they've changed the rules now, but for lacrosse back in the day, there was no like I'll call it like player safety. Like there were rumors of 8th graders committing to like Florida, for example.
Yeah,
so like
I remember that.
yeah, it's crazy. So like my really good friends in high school were absolute studs. They were committed to JMU and UNC respectively by summer of after their freshman year.
Wow.
And they had been talking to those schools the year before. Crazy. So in terms of like my recruiting process, a lot of the girls in my grade committed almost like fall to summer of sophomore year, with those like top schools, like committing a little bit earlier. I found, because I thought I was going to play field hockey, I wasn't as bought into the lacrosse recruiting process, but like my prospects weren't really impacted based on like the academic levels. Like I wouldn't have been, even if I was focused on playing lacrosse originally, like I wouldn't have been one of Duke's kids. Like academically I was there, but athletically I wasn't someone who like fit the mold of what they were looking for a kid who they really need to pull strings or have them reach certain benchmarks to get in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Which is totally fine. Like I love my time at Duke and I knew what the situation was going to be when I got to campus. With my mental health, like I am someone, for better or for worse, who's like gets hyper fixated on what I need to do to be successful. And so for me it was like, okay, your grades can't slip and you need to be like doing athletics. Like, was I the best teammate during that time period? No. I would like keep to myself. I wouldn't really interact, but like when it came to games, when it came to practices, I would show up and I would play my best. Same thing academically. I think really what got impacted was like my social interactions, in that I wasn't hanging out with friends as much. I would like keep to myself. I barely like left my room when I was at home. If that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. So was that your junior year? So your senior year, you knew you were playing at Duke, right? In the fall.
If I got
in the spring.
Yeah, by like February, yeah, I knew I was going to be going and playing at Duke.
Okay, so did that affect kind of like the pressure that you put on yourself? Like, you're a D1 commit. Did you have any pressure on yourself to compete to a certain level or play to a certain level for your teammates or for your coaches or even for your family?
Yeah, when I look back, I like think it's funny. I didn't have that much pressure because the two girls in the grade below me were like rock stars. Like they were scoring. One was an attacker, one was a midfielder, and I played midfield in high school. Like I was more of a defensive mid. They were both scoring 3 to 5 goals a game.
Wow.
Like they were like lights out. So I never really felt the pressure to perform. I almost was more like, where is my role in this ecosystem? Like they're putting up these points. What can I do? I can create space for them on the field. I can be like a leader. And so I never really felt because I was going to a certain school or doing a certain thing, like I needed to meet an expectation. I more so was like confident in that I wasn't this athletic recruit who like the coaches were looking at their like assists and their goals. I was more of an academic kid where as long as I was maintaining my like GPA and my SAT scores were great, like I didn't really have any of that pressure. I was more like relieved of like, okay, I know what the next 4 years is gonna be.
Yeah, and that's pretty helpful. I'm just gonna jump back to what I talked about before that statistic that I have. So, what is your opinion on how high schools and colleges handle this mental health crisis that we're having in the first place?
Yeah, so I think like this indirectly I think answers your question. I think there's a lot of like lack of knowledge around mental health. And when you think about like if you think about your parents or your grandparents and how they talk about mental health, or if you think back to like when I was growing up, like, you know, boys don't cry, rub it off, shake it off, you know, it's like all these like like it's all these things. And I think with men in mental health, a lot of it is this like false idea of what masculinity actually is, of like tough guys do this and that, which I'm like, I throw that in the trash. Like everyone has emotions. I think also like growing up, a lot of kids aren't taught how to emotionally regulate, how to talk about like what they're even feeling at a base level. And like when you don't know how to talk about what you're feeling, when you don't know how to name like, oh, what I'm feeling right now inside is sadness, and like I am sad because of this, I think like it starts to build on itself where it's like, oh, my heart's pounding and I'm sweating and I have butterflies in my stomach and I think I'm gonna vomit, like, and you freak out because you don't necessarily know what it is. Like, oh, that's anxiety. Like, why am I getting anxiety? Like, let's talk about it. And so I think from a young age, we're not talking about like how do we normalize these emotions, these feelings, these things with our mental health. And I don't think that educators, parents, coaches especially, like no one's handed a playbook. And I think even more so, we go off of like what we know. And if what we know is like, boys don't cry, you know, it's like unless you're willing to like break that cycle, break whatever you're thinking about it with, based on like what your dad said or your mom said, it's hard to then like change for someone else. That was like a roundabout way to like answer your question.
Yeah. But, no, it makes complete sense. And I think if coaches, not to take a shot at coaches because everyone has their different ways of doing things, but I think if coaches took more of an initiative to like set out a way of how they want to do things, like for example, my senior year, probably the closest team I've been a part of, besides being here last year, I remember we all sat down in the fall and we had this facility that my coach owned, and it was my entire team, and we all like we went around and we talked about what we've dealt with, and a lot of kids were talking about how they have anxiety and how they have all these feelings and all these pressures and like these things that, you know, you wouldn't even think to tell your parents or talk to anyone about. And we were doing this all with like our coaching staff because we were set that we wanted to go to the state championship, and we didn't, but we were all very emotional at the end because we knew that we gave everything and that we tried our hardest, and we really bonded as a group. And I think what my coach did, to give him some credit there, was he really allowed us to create a bond with each other, and I think that was something that was very strong and that stuck with me and taught me leadership. I was not a captain, but it gave me leadership skills. It gave me the ability to step up and talk to younger guys if they weren't really understanding what we were doing, or even younger guys holding older guys accountable to not know what we're doing. That was helpful. Like I could ask like a sophomore as a senior, what are we doing? What is this drill? What do I do here? What spot do I need to be in? and they always had the answer. Everyone had an answer. We had a chain of command. You ask an upperclassman, if they don't know, you ask a senior or a captain, and then captain asks the coach, and then that's kind of just how we did things, and it worked. And I think having that bond between the team is something that's really powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then to pull up that statistic that I was talking about, so when responding to mental health support questions, 69% of women's sports participants and 63% of men's sports participants agreed or strongly agreed that they know where to go on campus if they have a mental health concern, and that's a statistic from the NCAA. So do you believe that all students really know where to go? And if they do know where to go, do you really believe that they would?
They probably know, like, the general need, like, at Duke it was CAPS. Like, you knew what CAPS was, but, like, were you gonna get yourself to the building? Were you gonna schedule an appointment? Like, how many clicks did it take on your laptop to schedule it? Are you gonna see the same person? Is it a one-time thing? I personally didn't go to anyone on campus. I guess I did, but not for my mental health, until grad school, which I did, like, immediately after undergrad. And Duke, like, I think in the aftermath of Morgan's passing, or a year, I guess, before Morgan passed, like, they hired a sports psychiatrist to have on staff, which I think was like 10 years too late. And it's great that they have that resource now, but that was always so shocking to me, was we, in the sports student athlete ecosystem, like, we should be making sure we're providing these student athletes with the tools that they need to, like, be successful. And we had a psychologist who was incredible, but he was like, if golfers get the yips on putting, that's who you would go to, versus, like, if you're feeling anxiety, if you think you're depressed, you wouldn't go to them. And so I think without having that resource, and without, like, seeing the face of the person that you might be going to, or, like, building some sort of relationship before, or even having preemptive meetings, you know, before the crisis happens, like, I think that's really important. And that's kind of part of the reason why we founded Morgan's Message. Was I went to a school that has, like, huge endowment, top performing university, from medicine, law school, business school. Like, the kids I went to school with are, like, some of the smartest people I've ever been in a room with. Like, I always felt very lucky that I was never the smartest person. But we didn't have that. So to me, I was like, if a school like Duke doesn't have this resource, like, what does a school like UNC Greensboro or UNC Wilmington or some of these smaller schools or here, right?
Yeah,
like,
we do not have a sports psychologist.
They probably don't have any of these resources, and, like, we need to be doing more to normalize the conversation, but also try to offer some sort of resource to them, even if it's not a health professional, but rather be like, oh, I can relate to this feeling, like, let me check out breath work or journaling, or, like, the Morgan's Message community at my campus or close campus, like, maybe I'll reach out to them to see, like, how they foster conversations, which is great.
Yeah, that is great. And one of the other questions I wanted to ask you was, what do you think, because you can't get that from that relationship, you can't build that relationship with the sports psychologist, and especially, like, at a school like Emerson, it's hard to get that attention from a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So who does that fall back on is kind of the question that I want to ask. Is it the coach? Because I feel like that's necessarily a coach's responsibility, but to a certain extent, I think that it is a coach's responsibility to make sure that he is there for the players, or he or she is there for the players. And what kind of relationship do you think a coach and player should have compared to, say, the 2000s?
Yeah, I'll take, like, first I'll say, I think that coaches have one of the hardest jobs in that they're trying to play the role of multiple people in a student athlete's life. Like, my coach, for example, we spent 3 hours of practice time, we'll call it, like, an hour before, half an hour to an hour after, so, like, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. like it was essentially, right, like 40 hours a week that I'm spending with this person, and they're serving as my coach, my like friend at times, my mom away from home. Like they're trying to do a lot, and then you multiply it by, for us we had like up to 35, 40 girls. Like it's really crazy to be everything for everyone. And then on top of it, like I don't know necessarily like how many resources they're getting from the school to be like, hey, here's a new training on how to approach someone you think is struggling with their mental health, or hey, here's a training on how you can support your student athlete who maybe is struggling with things at home or has maybe lost a mom, a dad. So I think like coaches beyond the X's and O's are expected to do a lot. And so I think they should be thinking about like, how can I support my student athlete holistically as a human? And I think like what they're responsible for is building relationships so that they know who the student athlete is, and that way like if something does seem off, they can flag it, they can clock it, right? They're like, okay, I need to pull this kid into my office this week, or maybe ask them for coffee, or maybe ask a teammate to just check in with them, right? I think that's really important, but I think that like these coaches have a really tough job. That being said, I think like the NCAA, I think big organizations can do a better job of equipping them with the knowledge, and then I think it takes a great coach to take that knowledge and implement it. I think you see like some coaches, right, who for whatever reason don't think mental health is a thing, or like you're fine, whatever, like you don't have real world, like you don't actually have issues. Like I think that's a whole nother segment that I don't even like want to touch, but yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And another thing like my high school coach did, which I think would honestly help, and I don't think it would be that big of a deal for college coaches to implement into their systems, is that they could just set aside 15 to 20 minutes a day, and they could just have walk-ins if someone was struggling with something. If a teammate or someone, you could walk in and just go and talk to your coach about something, or they could help you get the resources that you need if they don't think they're equipped. Because I think that's another problem is like, do coaches feel the need now to be equipped to handle these issues? And I think to a certain extent, yes, they need to know where to go, and they need to know where to guide you and make sure that you're okay. And again, like building that relationship is very important, because I've had good relationships with coaches and bad relationships with coaches. And I think every coach that I've had in the last 5 years since I have gone to high school, I know that if I was ever in any sort of trouble, I know that I could reach out to him and he would answer, or my college coach, I could reach out to him and he would answer. Like, I have no doubt in my mind about that. And I think that's something that has helped me get through my problems, because I know my coach did that, and I went and I heard a lot about his life and what he struggled with, and we ended up relating about a lot of things to each other, and that grew us much closer, and we were able to have very good conversations about what we struggled with, and it also allowed him to open up to me, and it helped me like understand him more as a person. And we would go at it sometimes in practice, but like it was all love at the end of the day, and that's what I got to take away from it. And I think that really helped me get through high school, and looking during the recruiting process, talking to coaches on the phone, like kind of really getting a feel for who they are and what they can do for me and what they can bring to me and my education. That was a big part of coming here, and really in general just looking at schools. That was huge for me. So
I will push back and say, like, I think that's a pretty unique experience.
It definitely was.
Like, I have some coaches who I'm good. Like, I learn my lessons from them, but like don't like, I don't ever think about them, and I'm like, I hope your life is good, but like we're good.
Yeah.
And then I have some coaches who I'm like, I speak about them and think about them so fondly in terms of like how they were able to guide me. And I think when I think back to like what the commonality was, is they saw me really as a human, and they didn't really see me as like a commodity or someone who was performing for them. One of my assistant coaches at Duke, I mean, I love my head coach, but one of my assistant coaches at Duke is now the head at Ohio State, and she is like an all-time favorite in my book. Like, she just knew how to motivate you on the field and when to push you and when to pull back to be like, okay, you can tell she's off. I'm going to just think about supporting her today and not calling out like that missed slide or this or that. And I think that it's okay to not get along with all of your coaches. Just like you wouldn't get along with all of your teammates or, right? I think that's what's so interesting about college sports is you kind of just get there and then you're forced to be in this like pseudo friend group. And like what tends to happen, right, is there's little groups of people who get along, but it's really hard to get 40 girls, 50 guys to all see eye to eye on every single issue, especially when people are from different social backgrounds, economic backgrounds. So
yeah, and you grew up in Virginia, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I grew up in Massachusetts. I live 40 minutes away from here.
Yeah.
So it's very different from like my roommates who live in LA. Like that's very different from them.
So different.
Yeah. And that it's crazy to think about that for me because I don't really feel like away from home because I can just take the train home whenever. And I always think about that with them. Like it must be so much harder to just be at school. Like your family's so far away, and you have all these. Again, like leaning on a coach, like if your family's not there, that's another thing that I think your relationships with your coaches can be very different. Like I think there's the assistant coach, like you said, like that can be very helpful is having someone who's maybe a little bit less serious at certain times and you feel like you can open up to a little bit more and be a little bit more of like a friend.
Yeah.
And then I think having that, like the head coach obviously, has to have a lot of discipline and implement a lot of things into like the practice plan that get what he wants to get done, and he's kind of away from the rest of the team. But yeah, I got very lucky with my friends here. Like everyone in my grade, there's only 5 of us now, but we all get along. We all live together. We're all gonna live together next year. So I got very lucky in that aspect of things. But in high school, I would say it was a little bit more like maybe what you experienced in college, like that big 30 group of guys, and it was a lot of like little different friend groups, and there was a lot of talk in between the two, and I would say I was pretty neutral with everybody, but it definitely wasn't like we're all gonna go here tonight, we're all gonna go hang out after practice or after the game. It was kind of everyone was going every which way, so that was pretty different. But I actually listened to one of the first episodes of your podcast and you were talking about like yourself and how you grew up in high school, and you brought up how you kind of like chased the weekends and kind of like the rest of the week was a blur to you. I think I can relate to that a lot. I definitely experienced that in college a little bit more than high school, just because there's a little bit more, like life like nightlife in college, and I think there's a lot more to look forward to, especially when you're part of a team. Like you look forward to doing all these things, you have all these events, and you're kind of just, especially during the season when you have games and stuff, you're looking forward to the games. You're not really thinking about school, and I think that I struggled with that a lot last year. Is I'm in class, I'm just waiting, I'm not doing what I would be doing in the fall if I didn't have a game later, and I struggled with that a lot, and it slowed me down in school, and I had to catch up at the end of the year, and it was really hard for me, because and then in the fall I would chase the weekend. I'd just be like, I just can't wait to get to the end we have no school Thursdays here or Fridays, so
That's crazy.
Yeah, I would get off my Thursday class at like 4:00, and I'd be done, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna do nothing for the next 3 days, and then do all my homework on Sunday or Saturday morning. And then I was also wondering, so you said in that podcast, like you chase the weekends, you notice that you do that anymore, or has that completely gone away?
No. So I think like in high school I went out. My parents were probably concerned like on 1 or 2 occasions, but I was straight A student. I was like getting all these accolades athletically, like everyone I interacted with, like it was the classic, like I was kind of a nightmare in the house, but outside of the house, I was like buttoned up, smile. My mom like still tells the story of one of our neighbors was like, oh, I ran into Kat, wherever. You have such a great daughter. And my mom looked at her and was like, are you talking about my kid? Like she was kind of stunned, like, are you sure you're talking about my kid? Just because I was like, again, I don't think I knew really how to emotionally regulate, and I think outside of the house I was like holding on to a lot of stuff internally, and then when I get home I get whirling dervish. And when I got to college, it was the first time away from home. Like boarding school is not a thing where I'm from really. I went to public school. I was like at the dinner table with my family every night, and I had that like freedom to kind of do what I wanted, and I lost touch of like what I really wanted to do. I think that first fall and like the academics slid, and then it was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna do academics, athletics, and the social scene, and I'm gonna do them all really well. And the social scene ended up going from like a way to bond with my teammates or make new friends to like, I am so stressed about doing well at sports and doing well at school and like meeting people that like everything I did was like a means to the end of the weekend. Like Friday at 6 after like yoga with the team, I would be ready to like shower, change, and go out. And I think part of that was just, it was like an outlet, and it wasn't a healthy outlet because I should have been trying to deal internally with that stress. And as I went through school, like my freshman fall was really hard. My freshman spring got a little bit better. And part of that reason was you don't go out as much in the spring, and we were playing, we had a 72-hour rule, and we were playing, like it was maybe like 2 or 3 times a month that you could go out. And I didn't want to wake up the next day and feel behind of like, I wanted to go to the field, or I wanted to go stretch, or I wanted to go lift. So I was kind of forced into it. And then sophomore year, I still felt that, but instead of going two nights, I do like one big night. Ultimately, like senior year was a little bit different because of an injury, and junior year, same thing. But I still, when I would go out, I think like what really sticks with me is I would go out. Yeah. Like it was like all or nothing. Like I either wasn't going out at all. I didn't know how to like drink in moderation, which now I think is like such a crazy thing to even say, like drink in moderation. What does that even mean? Yeah. And then I graduated in grad school. I like barely went out at all, and I kind of realized through therapy and like finding different things outside of my sport, like once sport was gone and I was like, okay, what am I gonna do like with my life, with my time? I was like, wait, I don't actually really enjoy going out. Like I don't like in drinking in excess. I think like I was like, that actually doesn't vibe with me. And then to like round this long rambly story out, COVID was what really shifted everything. Like when I graduated grad school, my job didn't start until January. So I was at home and I wasn't really drinking. I went up to New York, went out a few nights, and was like, whoa, like didn't feel like myself. And then kind of moved home for COVID and was forced again to be like isolated with my family. Like none of us were really drinking because it was like, it felt weird to, and like to each their own, but like to me, sitting on the couch with like my mom and my sister, like ripping wine was like not what I wanted to be known for. Like I was like, this just doesn't really do it for me. Yeah. And then ever since then, like I don't know, like I think like I've been really lucky in that I've had some really great therapists who have helped me like work on my emotional regulation and like my mental health. And I've been on, not anymore, but in grad school I was on SSRIs and all this stuff. And I've now made the conscious decision, like usually not even to drink, because I don't like the way it makes me feel after, and I don't feel like I need it. And what I mean by that is like if I drink, like I get panic attacks, I get really anxious, I think everyone's mad at me, and it's like insane to be like I literally drive people insane. Like my fiance is like, everything's fine, you gotta stop. And I'm like, oh my God, but what did I say? Blah, 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 right? And
The morning after.
Yeah, the morning after.
Yep.
And like for me,
Sunday scaries.
Yeah, but I feel the lasting effects for like a few days.
Yeah.
Which like probably isn't normal, but whatever. So I now have like other hobbies I funnel things into. I try to find ways to connect with friends that isn't like going out. And I think it's really served me well, but that like wasn't really like, I think there are ways to do that in college, but it's hard because I think in college the culture really is like you bond around drinking and like, hey, you want to go catch the game at the bar and you like drink a few beers, right? So now that I'm in this different phase of my life, it's so different. So I no longer chase the weekends, but I think like even knowing now what I know, I don't know if like college would have changed it all.
Yeah. So to go back to what you said earlier, you said that your mom like saw a person in the street, and your neighbor or whatever. So my mom literally has always said that like same thing to me. They're like, I'm very close with my parents. I have a very good relationship with my parents, but they always joke with me and they're like, all these people like say that you're so nice and they're so great and why can't you be like that around us? And I'm just kind of like, well, you guys are my parents. Like you get not the worst of me, but like you hear the things that not everybody else hears. I'm not telling everyone all my problems, and you know I call my mom or dad probably every week and give them a rundown on what happened to me that week, and that's always been helpful to have, obviously. But like you said, like drinking in excess and you know having that like one big night, like you think, oh, if you just cut down, like you're going out 3 nights a week. Like so we have like Thursday we'll go out, Friday we'll go out, Saturday we'll go out because we have that like 3 day that 3 day weekend. So like we were doing that freshman year like a lot. Yeah. And it just got to the point where it was like and
you don't want to miss out.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to miss out.
With a team it's hard because you're really like, wait, my teammates are going out, this is a good bonding experience, and you feel like you have to be there. And like for me, and I don't know if this is like for you, but again, don't want to miss it. One or the other. Like if I was going out, I was like going out, and if I didn't want to miss something, I didn't want to miss something. So it's like this double. Yeah, you can never go in between. Yeah. And then you think that's gonna solve your problem of like 3 nights if you just go, well, I'm just gonna go out one night and like we're gonna go out, like we're gonna have a good night. Yeah. And in the season, like we don't really go out at all in the season. We practice like 6 or 7 days a week, and we have 2-3 games a week. Mm-hmm. So obviously, like when we were doing that in the fall, and then you go to the spring, we're like, whoa, like we cannot do this. Yeah. Like, we have to be locked in. We got to be going to lifts. We have to be doing all these. We have all these responsibilities, which will help us later in life. And it sounds like they've helped you later in life. You seem like a very organized person. And yeah. I'm sure like being a college athlete has helped you a lot, right? For sure. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's very interesting that you had that experience because I've had the exact same experience. Like you can't just do that one night. Like that's not going to solve any of your problems. If anything, it's going to make them worse because you're going to be thinking about all these things that you said. Oh, what did I do? Like who was I with? Where did I go? Like all these things that you can control if you just hadn't made that decision in the first place to go out and go that hard. And like you said, drinking in moderation, it sounds stupid now, but it's true. Like a lot of people will have a problem with that. They can never find the right amount to drink. All right, so to dive into a different subject. So what was social media like for you when you were in high school? And you can translate that into what happened in college. Yeah, like we had like Twitter in high school where we would like tweet, which is so funny looking back now. We'd be like, which was like one of my followers, like yada yada. Instagram was like maybe junior year of high school, senior year of high school, but like was like the Wild West in terms of like my friend and I would be at like a field hockey camp and she would have like a cape over her head and I'd like put it on Instagram and be like rooming with a Dementor, like just like dicking around like that, which is I look back and I think that's so funny and it's not how it is today. And there were none of these functionalities of like posting this on your story or like Snapchatting. There was no stories. I don't even think there were like screen recordings or really like maybe there were screenshots by the end of college, but you weren't blasting it out. Like you kept it almost like to your friends. I look back though and I'm really thankful that social media was not what it is today when I was in school because I like would drink and would just be like, oh, this is a good idea, or this is funny, and then I'd wake up and I'd be like, why did I think that was funny? Like, it's not. And it wasn't ever anything that, like, would have gotten anyone in trouble. Like, it was never, it was, like, always stupid stuff. Like, we would go to, like, there's this place called the Barn, and it was just, like, in a field of grass, and they would have, like, parties there. And it would be, like, us in, like, togas with, like, a thing of wheat in our mouths being, like, Caesar takes the farm. Like, it was, like, dumb stuff, but I'd be like, why am I doing this? Like,
like, a little bit, not embarrassed, but, like, why?
Yeah, like, oh my god, like, people are gonna know I'm, like, whatever.
People are gonna know I'm drinking, people are gonna, like, tie me to, I was here, I was there.
Yeah,
you know,
so, like, that, yeah, so I couldn't imagine now, like, being in college with social media, and just, like, I feel like, screenshotting, and once it's on the internet, it's kind of always on the internet,
Yeah, I wonder what is it like for you now? Like, do you notice? So I just went home for break, and I noticed it more when I was over break with my friends from home, because you know we tell each other like our stories from school and whatever, and we'll catch up, and we still talk a lot, and like we're all relatively close. But like I noticed, like we'll be watching a football game or doing whatever, and I look around and everyone is just like
on their phone, screenagers
staring at their phone.
My sister's
and it's
addicted.
so real. Like I look at my phone. I'm definitely a part of that, and I hate it. Like I wish I grew up in that generation. Everyone says that, but like I truly wish I did, because the amount of time that you lose in a day. Like you think, oh, I'm gonna learn all these things on Reels and TikTok. No, like you're not.
No, it's
you're
a
just
black hole.
literally brain rotting yourself, wasting your days. And I like look at my screen time, and I'm doing some productive things on my phone. Like I do a lot of work for school and stuff on my phone, but I look and it's like 4 or 5 hours a day. I'm like, oh my, like just on social media.
And you don't realize it.
And you have no clue.
Yeah.
When you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And it's pretty scary. And I wonder, like, when you're with your friends now, like, do you notice that kind of need to like push out what your life is like to the public? I feel like everyone tries to publicize their life so much.
So, I have had an interesting relationship with social media. When I was in grad school, all of the girls in my grade had moved to New York and started jobs. And I had, like, I would feel sad seeing them together. Even though I made the decision to do grad school, I'd be like, I'm really sad. They're having so much fun without me. Are we going to be able to be friends? Like, am I going to get invited to things once I move there? And it started to become this really big, like, anxiety driver for me. And then layered on top of that, I felt like I saw all these other people doing all these things. And, like, this is kind of when, like, there was no narrative around, like, social media is a highlight reel. Like, no one's showing you, like, them crying in their bathroom or, like...
Some people are.
Yeah, some people are. Some people are, which, like, I do think there's a time and a place for some of these things. I have a whole other take on influencers, but I've gone through, like, a few different renditions with, like, Instagram primarily. Like, I'm not on TikTok. I, like, tried to dip my toe in the water and was like, yeah, this isn't for me. Instagram, though, like, deactivated, reactivated, and I was in, like, deactivate mode where I found out, like, one of my really good friends from college who plays professional soccer had been pulled up to the U.S. practice team, and I found out, like, a month after the fact because I had texted him to catch up, or, like, I'd called him to catch up, and he was like, yeah, this amazing thing happened, and it really bummed me out. Like, I was like, I wish I had known about this. And so I realized, like, the way to keep in touch with friends and know what's going on in their life is to have some form of social media. But, like, I didn't want it to be performative or for anyone else other than myself, and, like, checking in on my friends without having to, like, call them. Because that's just not, like, sustainable if I have to call or text someone, like, once a week. Like, we all have lives. Like, I think in college it's a little bit different because you're, like, interacting with everyone all the time now, but, like, from my college friends, one of my best friends from college lives in Boston, but, like, she works in finance, and when we were roommates, I was seeing her every day, but now that we're no longer roommates, like, she's hard to get a hold of. Everyone else lives in a different city, so it's like you just don't have as many touch points, but it's honestly helped, I think, my mental health a lot, curating who I'm following and like what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I no longer follow the people that I like don't really like or like feel like they served like life at one point in time and now we're like in different phases of life or we have different beliefs or like whatever it is. And it doesn't I always take the angle of like I really am grateful for people who've come to my life and have like taught me, this is so cliche, but like have taught me lessons or have like supported me through something at one point in time. And it's totally fine to drift away from people. Like it doesn't have to be this big like I hate them now or I don't like them. Like you can still like be good, but be like, I don't need to see your shit. Like I don't really care. And that's fine. Like we don't have to like pretend that we care about something we don't. We can still like be respectful and whatever. So TLDR, like now my Instagram is like I follow probably like 200 different accounts, but I have like actually like 70 people I follow, and the other ones are like news places, different like mental health, right? Like it's like very curated, and I found like through that I'm way happier interacting with social media. But like you will never catch me on Twitter. You won't catch me on Threads. I'm good in my little bubble. And there are times where I'll just delete the bubble because I'm like, I don't need this for the next week. Because I do find like people tend to be, and you mentioned this earlier, like in their screens.
Yeah.
And like I'll put a hand up. Like I'm a big Redditor, which is like a random thing to be.
That is
like
random.
I love Reddit. But what I like about Reddit is like the discourse and like seeing like, and we're not going to go down this path, but for example, like the election and like different campaigns and different ads and different things, like reactions to different storylines or the facts. Like I find it really interesting to see different people, like different points of view, or like different books that I'm reading. Like I find that, but it's less like interactive, I would say. Like I'm a peruser, I'm not like an active commenter, which like I probably will never be an active commenter. I probably steered us away from the question, but that's how I kind of use.
No, you definitely answered the question.
Social media today.
So I think that's interesting because I like that you follow 200 people, only let 75 people or whatever follow you. I think that's an interesting route to take, and I think it's a route that I probably want to take at some point. But I think the problem that I have, and I probably will face at that point, is Reels. If you ever go on Reels on Instagram, so that's the problem. Is like you follow those 200 other accounts or whatever, and they're not people that you care about, but they're just like news sources or whatever. And then what Reels will do is obviously like take what you see and kind of twist it. Yeah, it's a TikTok.
Yeah.
Keep scrolling and scrolling. And I think Reels has even gotten bigger than TikTok, like to the point where it's bigger than TikTok. So I think that's interesting. And then to shift into another light here. So like you said, it's kind of interesting to see what people like put out there. Mm-hmm. So in my generation, I would say, I think I see a lot of like everyone's got a private story and like a public story.
I know, it's just like I'm like, why are we doing that? Sorry, okay. That's my thought.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Okay, I have a private story, but no, it's fine.
But like, do you find that, like, I guess my question for you is like, is your private story really who, if you could, those are the only people you would follow? Or let you follow you?
So I would say I would say yes, and even less, honestly.
Yeah.
And no, I don't have a crazy amount of people on my private story at all. I probably talk to everybody that's in my private story.
Yeah.
A decent amount. But I think it's interesting, like, even for me, like, what I post, I've, like, a pictures account where I'll post, like, me and a bunch of my friends have, like, pictures accounts that we'll post whatever on, and they're private on Instagram, and even, like, looking at that, it's, like, stupid.
Yeah.
Because it's, like, why not just have that as your main Instagram?
It's so funny that we have to be so curated.
Yeah. No, really, it is. And now that I'm thinking about it and saying it out loud, it sounds kind of interesting that there's certain things that you want everyone to see, and then there's certain things that you want only a select people.
Like people you quote unquote like trust.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
People you trust, and maybe people that you'll get a reaction out of.
Or like people who know where you're coming from.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I think like you can be sarcastic with things, and your friends will know like they're being sarcastic.
Yeah, like
but
even
other people won't.
Yeah, even like a subtle comment on like an Instagram post, or like maybe like 30 people will understand what I'm saying in this comment, or like get this like song lyric, like maybe this person, like people post song lyrics in their Instagram captions or whatever, and I think
Do
that's.
they really do that?
Oh, yeah.
Still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People
Please
still
don't do
do
that.
it.
Please
No,
don't
I
do
haven't
that.
done it. I put like
this is like a mental health conversation, but please don't do that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's fair. I put the song like in the, you know.
Yeah, but
that's
like
fair.
we shouldn't be like quoting John Mayer on
No,
a photo of the sunset. Like we're
I think we are past that in 2020.
Okay.
I think we're leaving that in 2025 for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's been awesome. Thank you so much for
of course.
Yeah, it's been great. But with that, thank you guys for listening. I'll wrap up the second episode. See you soon.
Sweet.